At this time, I would like to turn today's program over to Darren Cunningham from Informatica Cloud. Darren, you may begin.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today's webinar. We're really excited to have two very special speakers with us today who are going to be sharing some insights on the industry and how things are evolving and unfolding as it relates to cloud computing. We have Robert Malwald, who is the Research VP and Worldwide SaaS and Cloud Services Research Lead at IDC. And we're going to be talking about really what IDC is now referring to as the third platform and some of the challenges ahead. And with Doug Menefee, who's the CIO at Schumacher Group. And Doug will be taking us through his journey, real early adopter on all things software as a service, really evolving to a broader cloud strategy at his company. And I'll provide a brief introduction to Informatica Cloud because you're going to hear throughout today's conversation about the importance of integration to overall cloud computing success. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Robert to really bring us up to speed on what's happening, some of the trends, and where things are going as it relates to cloud computing.
Thanks, I appreciate it, and thanks to all of you listening for taking the time to listen to what we have to say. I hope you'll find it interesting and useful. We talk a lot about we're talking about cloud at IDC for almost 5 years, and we've been forecasting the SaaS market, kind of the precursor to cloud in terms of model and the way customers will source capability in the cloud for about 12 years. So a long, long time. And I think his side has a similar story. He's been an early adopter. I think one of the things that we're finding as we come into sort of the sort of early maturity of cloud, and we're starting to figure out and see the array of offerings that are available, the new business models, partnerships, ecosystems being formed, the new preferences the customers have for sourcing capability in the cloud, mean that it's not simply transferring a business requirement for IT capability to the cloud. There are some challenges and there's some complexity. And it's not necessarily a clear path through the forest, but we're beginning to see how customers are thinking about looking at challenges like integration and data management and sourcing capability from multiple sources and integrating cloud into what they do real well. So we're going to talk about how IDC sees cloud. We're going to talk about introduce the notion of the third platform, which I think is an important way to think about cloud and what it means and the evolution of T-World, and then talk about some challenges ahead. So I hope you'll find this interesting. And Darren, my mouse is frozen up here, so could you take charge and move me along? Just I've got no control over the keyboard.
Dang, here we go.
Okay. I don't have the light is not building on my end.
Changes here slide with borders.
Sure. So I'll talk to it while my computer does its thing. So I think we're all familiar with what's happened to Borders here in the last year or so. We've seen this great bookstore close. This one is actually not too far from my home, and it was a sad day to see it close down. But if you think about the key things that Borders was doing and was selling, I think I've got control back here, Darren, so I can go ahead, which is a good thing. I'm good to go. Books, music, movies, those things are digital, and as we've seen from the way Amazon has pushed into digital products, the way Apple obviously has done so, the way a whole host of content providers have said, you know what, we don't necessarily need somebody else to control the platform for distribution. We can do it ourselves in the digital world. We can source customers. We can make distribution. We can do all the things that are important to our world, and sort of disintermediates Borders and a whole set of other kind of providers' roles in delivering the capability. It's a change. It's part and parcel of cloud, but it's one that many providers have had to wake up to and say, this is new, this is different, and I've got to be able to respond to it. So we think about moving along, it really is here. If you think about the fact that there are more devices, really things like smartphones, iPads, and also endpoints, RFID sensors, more applications, digital content, much video-based, and the requirement for encoding, decoding in near real time is all of a sudden here with new cloud-based expectations, consumers and businesses really want their data on demand, real time, any device, any location. And as I talked about earlier, as more and more companies start to really build the notion of cloud sourcing into their agendas and thinking about where can I get not only good capability, but how do I consider integrating those services I source externally into what I do, what my IT team does. There's a need for more performance to meet these customer requirements around demand, supporting more mobile devices, more content, more data. So we believe that the leading buyer organizations, especially, understand challenges. It's probably one of the key reasons why what drives our interest in these kinds of webinars is because understanding what the requirement is and how some customers are solving it is really critically important. It's kind of part and parcel of the new normal. The way our IT organizations are dealing with the more applications and more data and more content, more devices. If you think about some of the changes that cloud drives in business, we kind of point to 5 or 6 that we think are absolutely critical, and both for suppliers and buyers of IT capabilities. So, from a provider perspective, clearly the search for new market growth has driven the change to cloud, right? Serving underpenetrated markets, emerging markets, BRIC markets, SMB customers that they could not always otherwise reach. The software world right now is about $550 billion in 2011, but the packaged software part of that is growing at about 4%. Whereas the cloud piece of the software market is growing about 29%, and so there's a search for new markets, and because the traditional stuff is really slowing down. There's also a push from a customer perspective for better alignment of utilization and capability and capacity and IT service delivery. We all know that there's a bunch of stuff that we've bought, whether we're paying maintenance on software or we're amortizing the equipment that we have, or we're otherwise trying to keep running some of the components that we have in our IT data centers. There's all that stuff, and then there's no accounting of measuring that up against what we actually really need. Our needs change, and oftentimes what we have isn't as nimble, doesn't change quite as fast, and so that kind of right sizing is also a big driver. From a provider perspective, the need for new approaches is clearly there, because traditional distribution models for something like packaged software or networking components, say, in the traditional distribution model, the two-tier distribution model of a like Cisco, often means that getting innovation to market is slow, and refreshing that innovation is also very slow. So more of a direct relationship between provider by providing services like networking services or application services is kind of helps with that approach, the new approaches. And if it wasn't enough there, certainly disruptors are pushing some of the stodgier players in the software world, really in the overall IT world. These guys like Google, Amazon, Salesforce, and many other ones that have gotten early into the cloud business, understand the requirements, understand the customers are asking for new capabilities and access to new innovation quickly, are forcing the pace, and that is without a doubt happening. And we see it in the kinds of M&A activity and the software world especially, and we see some of the sleeping giants waking up and saying, we absolutely have to be part of this. This is where customers want us to go. I mentioned before the desire to own the distribution platforms. That's very, very key. And then I think what we're going to talk about today mostly is how IT's role is transforming now. And at the end of my presentation, I'll have some recommendations for what we talk to CIOs about in terms of how they need to reshape their data centers and refocus their staffs to meet some of the changing requirements and just the changing scenario of cloud sourcing. But dealing with hybrid IT is absolutely critical for these guys. So before about right-sizing capability with or capacity with demand. And this is from a survey, a study that we did a little over a year ago, and we tried to understand how much of capability that's being deployed and run and managed at great expense in IT data centers is truly differentiating for the customer. So not do you use it, or do your users access that server or that data on that SAN on an ongoing basis, but does it provide differentiating value to your customers? And what we found is that a relatively low percent, depending on the efficiency of the data center and the kind of company that we're talking about, a relatively low percent was really highly differentiating function at a pretty efficient mid-sized company. And the level of physical surge and store overutilization, so the load of an efficient mid-sized company was actually quote. And as you all probably realize, maintaining the SAN of the NAS and the server topology at your data centers is a key human cost and people cost, and there's a lot of license and power, cooling equipment costs built into that. So using the utilization being as low as it was a real eye-opener to us and to many of our clients who look at the study. So we find that some custom applications, some packaged applications, some systems really do provide differentiating value, but many of them not. And it's becoming apparent to us as the course of doing this study and follow-on studies that there are significant systems that we run that do not return truly differentiating value by running them locally. So having them important actually could be important, but running them locally, having them on site, no matter what you think about cloud, having those things on site was not always quite so important as people thought. So external cloud services really represent that transfer of responsibility, transfer in location, and shift in risk from the business to the provider. And that was something that was that we came away with the tail end when we understood very well what was truly differentiating in organizations. I'll talk about introduce the notion of the third platform real quickly. So for the last 40 or so years, the IT industry has periodically refreshed itself on new solutions, business models, industry structures, but it's always been rooted in the notion of a platform, right? So a platform for ecosystem, for solutions creation, delivery. If you think about computing is now a dramatic refinement of the function of delivering utility service. So looking back 40 years, we see that what separates eras, and we're going to talk 3 eras here, is really a shift in the platform. And to see the whole big picture, I think it really makes a lot of sense. So the first platform that drove industry growth way back in the 60s, the dinosaur days, was really based largely on mainframes and terminals. And the number of people who actually touched IT was measured in mere millions. And the number of packaged applications was in the low thousands. And the size of the industry, which I tend to think of as as a product of users and uses, was really tens of billions of dollars or millions of dollars in revenue. When you think about the PC, the P platform era launched its growth in the 1980s. Very quick. This is a matter of change in scale. We weren't talking about millions of users, but hundreds of millions of users who actually touched the stuff and used it, and really tens of thousands of new apps are built on the platform and the cloud server environment. I think that notion that customers could build applications, they could build mods and objects and changes in UI and all kinds of new things that made their experience richer. That was really a pretty dramatic innovation. So scale changed, customers being able to touch the systems changed a lot. So we're seeing a new platform emerge now. So its ingredients are mobile devices and apps at the edge, and really cloud is a new core. Cloud is the core platform here. So cloud with the entire traditional stack and mobile broadband, 4G and beyond, connecting connecting the platform and device industry solutions on the top there. So cloud is the new platform. We went from mainframe to client server to cloud as a platform for serving really a whole vast array of customer types and industry solutions. So we think that millions of new application services are going to be built on this third platform, and it's really will be driven by the fact that customers will have access to platform as a service and be able to have tooling to create new applications. Commercial developers will have much better means of accessing not only tools to build and create applications, but then customers and sell them. So broad access to customers via marketplaces, and eventually these numbers are potentially infinite and unlimited are of course taken in stride, but I think you get the picture that vastly more infinite and vastly less limited number of hardware resources mean that both enterprise customers and developers are really the key to pushing industries forward. Are going to be part and parcel of the third platform. So we think this is just a kind of a construct that we use at IDC to think about how cloud is not just a new place to deploy your IT, but is a new industry platform or ecosystem for building new capability and new business models, and reaching brick companies or countries. And this platform represents a huge shift in customer spend. So if we whip through these 77% of North American companies currently using cloud, 70% of companies using cloud expect to increase by 2012. A good chunk as well, and increase their resource spend. Just building through these, you can see that there's strength throughout the stack. IDC predicts typically when we survey for why, business agility is really the most important factor. So particularly in some industries, cost, in utilities, manufacturing, healthcare, financial services, take cost off the table is not nearly as important as being able to improve business agility. Meeting compliance requirements, for example, in healthcare means that you get to bid on certain contracts and play in certain markets. And so it's absolutely critical that you have tons and tons of uptime. You've got a rock solid SLA, and you can improve your business agility and scale very, very quickly. That's even more important than cost. But for many horizontal customers, cost flexibility, the way they amortize their equipment, the way they treat capex versus opex, the way they look at upfront spend versus long-term spend, a whole variety of factors are super important to them. At the end of the day, yeah.
Just a quick question about that. I think that's a really important point about business agility versus cost. Is that one of the reasons you'd say so much of the early adoption of software as a service was coming from the business? And is that starting to change?
It's a great question, Darren. So I think the answer is yes. Line of business users that had a budget and their needs were not being met by the set of applications they had available to them. They needed to source new capability. They needed to be very agile, or otherwise they couldn't keep up with their competitors. And absolutely, I think that's what drove a lot of the early line of business, interest in buying in cloud. And is it changing? Yeah, we see a lot more of a kind of a re-centralization of that IT vetting and buying function inside of IT data centers, IT staffs, I should say, in mid-sized and large organizations. And what drives that change, Darren, is the fact that when we ask line of business users why would you change? Why would you look at a different buyer, a different vetter? Why would you need IT to be involved in your acquiring and ongoing management of a SaaS service? The answer is almost always along the lines of it got real complex. So it's answered in a variety of ways, but it's either the scale got too big, we needed to integrate with data sources that we couldn't figure out how to do ourselves, we needed help with that. We just couldn't manage it and scale it on very well. So it's a great point. It started out in line of business, and it's moving more and more toward IT management. But improved business agility really still drives a lot of what we see. So we see that about 80% of net new commercial applications will be developed for cloud in 2012. So basically what we're saying there is less than 20% of net new coming to market in 2012 are going to be built around the notion of shipping something on CD. So when you sort of unpack that and step away from that, you get a sense that, well, there are lots of things that those guys need. They need a platform. They need a place to host. They need a way to reach customers. So very, very changing world, but a lot more and more of IT activity, new IT activity is really moving to cloud. A ton of the spend on enterprise applications will be delivered via cloud. By the end of the day, that's a really important point. We think that over 80% of Global 2000 will still have at least 50% their IT capability, so their equipment, their applications, their workloads on site by 2020. That's still a long ways off. So I think what the takeaway from this slide is lots and lots of activity in the cloud, both from enterprise customers and from commercial suppliers. But at the end of the day, there's still a huge requirement to supply components to big customers to deploy on site, and to provide integration and a whole host of other services that help them live in both places at the same time. So real quick, this is going to be no surprise to anybody who's living in our day and age, right? You've got a whole bunch of assets that live on site at your company, including a new variety of private cloud appliances. And there's a whole host of capability that you source at different parts of the stack in the cloud, whether it's an application kind of service, or whether you're doing test and dev, or a database management, or some other kind of platform middleware kind of service that you're sourcing, whether programmer for the long haul, or infrastructure, whether you're getting some networking capabilities, some communications capability, you're doing some kind of, maybe you're doing system management, IT asset management, some other kind of help desk function, whatever kind of capability you're getting from the cloud, right? It's probably coming from a fairly heterogeneous set of suppliers. And while you, generally speaking, have got it figured out within the four walls of your data center, I think that the reality that many of us are facing now is we've got a new hybrid IT organization, and in which the comfort of knowing exactly what's where within the assets that are in your four walls, and exactly how to reach the person who's responsible for running it and for performing tasks like integration, process data integration, those days are a little bit over with, and it doesn't mean that it necessarily is vastly scary for customers. I think it's just a matter of figuring out what the options are, and figuring out how suppliers are there to help them work through some of these more complex management issues when you've got a new hybrid IT organization. So what we ask customers to do really is to rethink IT organization for clouds, right? So reorganize the groups that you have under your control right now. So we recommend splitting into really four major teams here. Oops, let me put this back here. Information facilities team, which is responsible for physical security and really building the stuff that's in transformed data centers. So it's less about managing individual piece parts, and more about ensuring that the whole thing is running properly. So they're really more data center architects. Information services team is really the heart of operations here, because it encompasses both DevOps staff, which is usually an application staff, and production, and the create and manage and lifecycle applications internally. Those guys, but also all of the data and process integration activities. So the data czar, which is a role we're seeing more and more organizations. Whether they're a CISO, or they're a compliance officer, or they've got some other title. Basically, they're in charge of understanding where data exists and where it lives, whether it's inside the organization or it's in a data long-term storage site, or a dedupe site, or some other place. Understanding what lives and how to lifecycle it properly. and all of the data integration activities. So they're also the face of IT when somebody wants a new capability, because we see less and less customers saying, when we start to source more of our capability from the cloud, we're not laying off. We're not reducing our full-time employee load. What we're doing instead is we're redeploying them along the lines of these four teams here, but we're also doing a lot more outreach to the business. So I mentioned here face of IT when somebody wants a new capability. Big data and big data, based kinds of activities. Whether they're, whether it's a new web front end capability, or it's a Hadoop on ramp, or it's a data project. That's where that would fall, and they really comprehend the whole life cycle of the application service. The information access team is really all about single sign-on and access to various information assets and application assets that the company has, and making sure that's done securely. And it's also really device agnostic, which is becoming more and more important, as I think we all realize. And then finally, the services broker team. And this is a new role essentially, and it's mostly an external facing role. But as we see more and more IT teams interested in transforming themselves from being a cost center, not so much to being a profit center, but to being more of a service center, and that's to us what private cloud really represents. It's sort of beyond the notion of virtualization and the technical aspects of how you work out work automation and reformulating what your assets are in IT. It's how IT interfaces with the rest of the business, and the fact that they provide services that can be accessed through a variety of portals or whatnot that are operationalized to serve them. The services are sourced; they're either created internally or they're sourced externally from the cloud, and the services broker team is keenly in charge of keeping an eye on contracts and sourcing and all that kind of stuff. Make sure that goes very smoothly. The thing I want to talk about, if I could, is some survey data that we just got in a very short while ago last week, and we asked the question of who is responsible when you've got on-premise data assets and you source from the cloud. Who is responsible for the configuration, deployment, and management of integration of these services, and for providing a single control point for integrations involving cloud? What we find is 83% said you have a requirement for integrating SaaS service with an MS application, at least one. Could be 10, could be 15, could be 20. It's a lot, but only 17% said, you know what, we're not seeing that today. It's really a huge number. It's a big pool of people of companies that have this requirement, and we find that 28% said, of the choices available to me, my team is going to be using a cloud-based integration tool like Informatica. That's the way we're going to approach this problem. And I would say it's even larger than that, because the upper right-hand quadrant is 25%. That's the SaaS provider is going to do it for me. In most cases, the SaaS provider has no assets or no capability to provide that integration other than what they get from a company like Informatica, which often use Informatica services. And so I think it's really over 50% of companies say that have this requirement say, we are looking for a new cloud-based tool that can handle this kind of requirement. And when we ask the other side, do you require a single control point for almost all of your integrations, really one pane of glass for viewing all of the activity that's going, all the integration points happening between the applications you have and the stuff in the cloud? Really, 78% say yes, we do. So again, it's similarly a very large number say we have this requirement, and again here 27% say we're going to be going. We need a third-party cloud provider to deliver this kind of capability to us. They understand what it means to do beyond simply the conventional, middleware, on-site middleware capability. They understand what it means to have to integrate from multiple points, and the sort of the well-understood integrations have already been set by them and are parts of their library as they face customers. So I think that was interesting for us to see, and as we talk about this a little further. So that's what I've got to say. Here's my contact if you If you want to reach out to me, I'd love to hear from you. And with that, I want to turn it back to Darren.
Great, thank you, Robert. That's it's a lot of great information there, a lot of good market research. I mean, it's now I guess I want to hand it over to Doug to see if what Robert's going through is kind of your experience. Are you looking at cloud as the next big platform? Any disagreements? And then maybe Doug, or Robert, as Doug goes through, you might have some questions as well as we go through his experiences over at Schumacher Group. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Douglas.
This is Nicky. I was just going to talk about how the cloud is a fad, and we're going to. No, I'm joking.
Nice.
I'm going to talk. I think that what Robert presented was spot on, and it mirrors the journey of Schumacher Group over literally the past 7 years. And the Chief Information Officer for Schumacher Group. And if you'll bear with me for the first couple of minutes of the presentation, I'm going to set up who Schumacher Group is, and it's not by any means to go and get services from us. It's to better understand the type of ecosystem and the challenges that I'm facing as a Chief Information Officer with the organization and how rapidly we're growing and those type of things. In fact, I don't want you to utilize our services because the premise of our service is that we provide emergency medicine services. So it means that if you are sick and in need of health care, then chances are you're coming into one of our 200 emergency departments that are spread out across the country. And throughout the organization, we're about 1,700 employees. But if you backtrack just 7 years ago when I started with the company, we were 750 employees. So you can see the rapid growth that we've had. We were treating 1 million patients 7 years ago. Today we're treating 4 million patients on an annual basis. And we've grown from just 3 regional offices into the whole slew that you see here to include business process outsourcing partners in Mumbai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, and Noida, India. It's a global presence, and taking and what we've been able to do is really leverage the cloud as a strategy position for the organization. So when I was hired with the Schumacher Group, I report directly to Dr. Schumacher, the CEO of the organization, and he said the way to impact healthcare and the way to change healthcare for the better of the patients is going to be for us to basically be able to leverage technology in the back office systems and the infrastructure environment. And we want to grow extremely rapidly and grow market share and have increased engagement with the patients. So technology is considered to be a strong strategic investment in the organization. And if you go back to 2005, inside of that, cloud wasn't even a term. It was application service provider. And I took a little bit of a risk coming in as a young CIO into the organization of saying, I believe that the way of the future is not to put investments into data center type of applications, but it's to start to leverage these application service providers and look at more software as a service model. 7 years ago, or just even last year, Schumacher Group was known as a practice management organization, and that means that there's physician practices that are inside of those emergency departments, and then hospitalists are individuals that once you're admitted into the hospital, those hospitalists see you instead of your primary care physician. So it's very easy for us to, my elevator pitch was literally a 2-floor, 3-floor elevator pitch of we recruit, retain, and contract with physicians to be able to staff emergency departments and hospitals so that we deliver quality care to patients. Well, as we're into this year, and literally the middle of last year, and healthcare reform was a big driver for us to look at what was missing from the healthcare reform legislation that came into place, and was that there were so many opportunities that people were missing with the core of what the healthcare system should be focused on today, and that's about patient engagement. So we extended our service lines beyond emergency medicine and hospital medicine, and we're doing care management services. We're engaged in wellness programs with employers that are out there. We have solutions in place for helping patients understand their bills and their financial obligations and negotiate the information between the patient and their commercial payment, or look for other opportunities for payment. And then retail medicine on the clinics, on urgent care and physical medicine. And we literally expanded the company from 2 service lines to a total of 9, and I've just got a couple of them indicated here, over a 6-month period of time. We hired over 700 people in less than 6 months within the organization. And you can see our growth curve is quite rapid, and we've kind of a stable state for many years. But what I recognized was to put that type of infrastructure in place in a data center, and the provisioning of the servers, and it's 3 to 4 weeks to get servers to be shipped over to you, and then the configuration and all your disaster recovery and business continuity. Already been adopters on the cloud computing. We're going to continue to leverage that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through our journey into the cloud. And the first thing that I want everybody to recognize is we didn't go through this process because we said, oh, the cloud is cool, or it's a buzz term that was out there, or those type of buying essentially the marketing hype cycle. And I'm being very transparent here, is that as a consumer of technology, I need the technology to meet business needs. I don't need it to be the need for a marketing presentation. The value proposition, though, is that it's what we found with software service solutions in 2005 and 2006 was that it gave us the ability to scale very quickly. It addressed some business continuity needs within the organization. Us being in healthcare, we saw what happened just 2-3 years ago. It literally turned the healthcare industry upside down with the signature of a president. That same environment happens to us in each state. Each year, a governor can change the way that healthcare is impacted in that particular state. You need, like anybody inside of information technology today and in business, to deliver more, faster, less expensive. And then, quite frankly, the complexities of the world and instant gratification and more people engaged in the process of advanced workflows. And most importantly, what we wanted to drive was improvement of innovation. So I have a hard time buying into the concept that there's innovation of taking out a server out of a box, sticking it inside of a rack, watching blinky lights on it, plugging a blue cable into it, and waiting for those blinky lights to go out. That's the utility component of it. I believe that today's environment is the computing power and computing servers, that processor has become a utility for us to be able to leverage. And then there's, as Robert was saying earlier, that people are adding applications. That's into the software service type of model. And for us, what I've transitioned into this organization into is a buy 80% of the solution and then configure and customize the remaining 20%, and that's the innovation layer that we're able to add into the environment. So if we go back to 2005, when I just first joined the organization, we were like any small, mid-sized business, 500 employees, had a customer relationship managed application that was a homegrown access database that had grown into a SQL environment with an access interface, known as Doyle's database, a single person that did the development on it. And so we had a lot of flexibility, and it didn't empower the users to really be successful in their job roles. The culture of the organization was anti-anything not Microsoft. So it was very much a build what you do everything in a .NET type of environment and build it from scratch on a Microsoft platform inside of a data center. Build it before you buy it. So don't go and buy the solution that's already purchased. It's a transformation for the organization. We really lacked a project management discipline, and we had a single developer-controlled solutions. And I still remember walking into Dr. Schumacher's office and saying, do you want to be a software development company, or do you want to be a change agent in the healthcare system or a physician practice management company? What is it you want to be? And he said, I do not want to be a software development company. So that's what transitioned us into the buy it before we build it type of mindset. There was a strong prejudice against the environment, and it was everything had to be housed inside the data center, which was really creating challenges as we had a growing mobile workforce, a growing workforce that was across the organization and punching holes in the firewall and the security monitoring and everything that went along with that. So as you can imagine, we had a lot of frustration amongst the business users and the inability to execute IT projects and the desired change. So all in the midst of this, on the first 6 months on the job, then Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Rita hit. So we're based out of Lafayette, Louisiana. Hurricane Katrina hit to the east of us. Hurricane Rita hit to the west of it. Luckily, our community was not devastated like the Gulf Coast was, along with those hurricanes. But what really drove home for me was everything we had, everything inside of a centralized data center that was susceptible for risk, for destruction in that event. And people were not thinking about business continuity; they were thinking about the disaster recovery plan and the impact of how long that would take to recover that information. So we were making a decision on a new customer relationship management solution, and we had a decision to make between Microsoft CRM 3.0, which had skipped 2.0, and inside of our internal environment, or to go with Salesforce.com. Small implementation, 75 licenses, and we opted to go with Salesforce.com because we didn't want to put more infrastructure inside of our data center until we could reinforce that, and it was such a critical function of our environment. But what we realized was that we had to integrate that solution with our on-premise type of solutions that were out there, Microsoft SQL, PeopleSoft, or Centricity application. And what we did was we spun up Salesforce.com in a limited implementation, did a cloud integration between Tangier, which is a position scheduling application, Contract Management, which is an AppExchange partner, did integration on-premise, and we're kind of some of the early adopters of doing integration between cloud and on-premise environments. And then as we transitioned into 2007, what we thought was, hey, this is working so well. Let's take our PeopleSoft environment and move it into a hosted environment, more managed services. Let's start to explore Google. But what we also started to have to identify was the fact that we needed this identity management piece. So we were bringing up applications outside of our environment. We needed individuals to have the same username and password. So we put in place Ping Identity to start to do identity management for us and start to explore Google Apps as a solution. We strategic investments going from a paper environment to a paperless environment, and brought on Kofax, which is an image capture solution, and OnBase as a content management for all of those images, and literally scanning almost 100,000 records a day into a centralized repository, and brought up an EMC SAM for us to store all of that content into the organization. So then we transitioned to 2008. What we found was we kept having more and more business needs as we were growing as an organization. And as we're looking for a budgeting solution, we found Host Analytics, and Host Analytics was software as a service model, and it's proven to be a benefit for us, and we could easily integrate that into our other on-prem solutions and cloud-based solutions, because what we're looking for are solutions that have very solid web services or APIs, REST APIs, or at least the ability to move data in and out of those applications behind the scenes. What we did was we did run into limitations with PeopleSoft, because in a hosted environment, what we found was it was a closed ecosystem and that we didn't have access to that type of environment. But we spun up Workday, and we're one of the first 100 companies within the Workday environment for human resource information system. And again, if you can see down at the bottom below Salesforce.com, and we really put everything centered around Salesforce.com as it almost being the broker for moving information, being the primary source of information. It wasn't an integration piece of the puzzle. We were utilizing tools such as Cast Iron and Boomi at that particular time. And then we were also brought on a second single sign-on solution, because not all of the solutions could work with Ping Identity, so we introduced Simplified into the mix. So 2008 was when kind of the rapid growth inside of cloud-based applications, but not everything talked well with each other. I'm going to skip a couple of years here and jump over to 2011, and the purpose of this architecture document is to show that what we really started to do was to migrate. We had software services already being valued for the organization. We're already using Force.com as a platform and service type of environment, so, Google as a platform and service, and then we've been migrating into infrastructure as a service with Amazon, and spinning up Microsoft instances, or buying applications that had Amazon essentially as their infrastructure. And you have to get into where are your data centers, where are they relocated, all those types of conversations inside of the mix. And what we found was that in 2011, we started bringing up more solutions, and every time we would go and look for a product, we were determining, hey, should we bring this up on-premise or should we bring this up in a cloud environment? And we were literally doing bake-offs between cloud-based application and on-premise applications, and we found it was faster, it was less expensive, and it was more scalable for us to bring up those cloud-based applications. And today, in 2012, what we're doing is going through a consolidation effort with a lot of these cloud-based or hosted solutions. So we've taken people out of our mix and have expanded our into Workday as our financials and HRIS solution. That'll be live in October of this year. We eliminated Ping Identity out of the mix and consolidated into Simplified. We selected Informatica of the Power Center as well as Informatica Cloud to do that hybrid, the cloud-to-cloud integration as well as the cloud to on-premise solutions. And we're heavily utilizing Informatica because it's also doing all of our business intelligence ETL processes that are being loaded into a 7-terabyte data warehouse that's still on site today, but we see as we go into 2013 us moving business intelligence out into the cloud. And you can see down below the Amazon icon, we've moved and have stood up several instances of the Microsoft SQL, and we've just migrated our MicroStrategy stack over onto the Amazon services. A big challenge for us being a healthcare organization is obviously PCI and HIPAA compliance and those type of things. So we could go a little bit extra further on business associates agreements, security audits, security assessments, as well as putting in place tools that will encrypt the data at rest and in motion, and obviously in intermediate transmit or backup type of environments. Another big thing that we brought up this past year was in contact, and we had our growth required us to really stand up a lot of contact centers. And standing up those contact centers, we had to do it in a compressed time period, about 3 to 4 months period of time. By purchasing InContact and Salesforce.com Service Cloud and Force.com for these new service lines, we stood up those business lines in less than 3 months period of time, and we already placed over 7.2 million outbound calls and 2.2 million connect points. We would not have been able, we would still be in the conversation of putting in place and configuring equipment had we not leveraged a software service type of telephony solution that's out there for us. And as I move forward, the key things and key takeaways that I would recommend for individuals in their considerations are, from a project management perspective, if you start in this journey, a waterfall approach with cloud-based applications doesn't work very well. It's very much agile. They're releasing solutions every quarter, if not every 2 to 3 weeks that's inside of it, with backwards compatibility that's associated with it. So look at project and milestones that are 1 to 3 weeks in deployment as you're going through this. Find a model which works with your culture. And quite frankly, when I came in, I was a change agent. I experienced 87% turnover in the first year and a half within our organization. It was something that needed to happen because we were transitioning from a build to a buy model, and the talent since that 87% turnover in the first year and a half, I've experienced less than 1% turnover. So you definitely have to focus in on the training and the change management of the IT professionals, especially your network operations teams that maybe they don't see their job managing Amazon services, and you have to really work with them on the product briefings and how they fit in to driving change and driving innovation for the organization from a business alignment perspective. And key to this is I really believe that you have to have executives driving this change in the process. And if a CIO on the call or a manager of information technology, you have to be ingrained in the conversations and the vision of where you're taking the organization. And then from a professional services perspective, the integration piece of it is don't stand up software as service and platform as service without thinking about integration points. Look at other customers that have had similar integration points. Don't look at trying to do integration up up front. You literally have to say, what can I accomplish over the next 3 weeks, and do integration one at a time as you go through it. If you look at it from a complete holistic approach, you'll probably get nauseated. You'll probably want to quit your job. You have to put this and chunk it into small pieces that go on. Key success with all of this is really single sign-on. And imagine bringing up and standing up all these apps that are out there. You have to find a single sign-on solution that it already either has pre-built connectors into these cloud-based solutions, but the users, they can't remember all the usernames and passwords, and quite frankly, it becomes a security risk if you have them. And the saying is that they're running into all this administration issues of security privileges in the application. So definitely bring single sign-on up as you're starting to go into the second, third, fourth type of cloud-based application. And then for me, this is just always a best practice of if you're engaged in professional services, build in penalties and don't let them drag those projects on for 6, 7, 9, 10 months inside of it. Get those every 30 days to 60-day type of releases, and if they don't meet those milestones, have it built in contracts for penalties. And from a security perspective, balance your security needs along with your risk tolerance of the company. Remember when I started this, the journey was a small business or mid-sized business, and I didn't have a team of security experts. I still don't have a team of security experts, but these cloud companies only have teams of security, and they have more to lose than I do in many regards. If they have a breach of one of their customers, they know that it's going to hit national media, and it could jeopardize their whole disruptive models that are out there. And ask the hard questions to find your comfort zone, but also be realistic when you're comparing your internal security versus their security. I've been in many meetings where we're asking our partners out there to do 3% more than what we do internally, and security really comes down to a risk tolerance question that you have to address within your own internal organization. At the end of the day, this is all about people, process, and technology. I'm a huge believer of being strategically aligned with the business and aligning the people and the processes and having a technology conversation. If you start off business alignment with a technology conversation, you're probably not going to be that successful. You should launch those people and those processes and then determine which technologies can be applied to that. And that's how we've really viewed us migration and how we've been successful in moving our organization into the size that we are today and continue a 15 to 20% annual growth rate. So, with that, I'll turn it back over to Darren.
It's been a journey, and I remember I think I sat through one of your presentations back in 2006 or 7 at Dreamforce. It was pretty cutting edge stuff at the time. So congratulations on the path and all the success you've had along the way. So I want to spend a couple of minutes, and then we have a couple of questions also that have come in, and for both of you. So we've talked about migration. And Doug specifically talked about his kind of evolution in Informatica and mentioned Informatica Cloud as really a hybrid offering. And for those of you who know Informatica, we've got certainly our roots in data warehousing. The company's been in business for 15 years. But what you may not know is that about years ago now, we invested in building a software as a service approach to integration. And this has also been a very rapidly growing part of our business, with a focus on that agility, simple use, interface, rapid deployment, and unification with our core platform. It's really been our primary focus at Informatica as we think about cloud integration. As you see from this slide, we have continued to execute against our objectives, which have been deliver really broad connectivity, make sure you can connect all the different systems, as you saw from both of our presenters' slides. More and more apps are coming online and moving to the cloud. Being able to deliver really purpose-built cloud integration services and then a unified overall cloud integration platform. So that's been really our path at Informatica, and we're very proud of the success we've had. Companies large and small, we're now actually running over 1 billion transactions a day through our Informatica Cloud service. And visit trust.informaticacloud.com to see that in action, how many jobs, how many records are being processed. Really across industry, I think representing the fact that really any organization moving to the cloud or very serious about cloud applications and platforms is really going to have to think through integration. So our message is always don't wait to integrate, get started. You can go to our website and get started with a trial. But I want Robert back in for a quick comment on what you heard from Doug. Is his journey unique? Is he way ahead of the curve? What's your feedback on kind of what you've heard from him and what he's gone through over at Schumacher Group?
Doug is an early adopter, and I think he's done so not just in a risky run to the cloud way, but in a way that reflects a very mature and sophisticated use of IT and understanding what his company needs. I mean, especially when Doug, you talked about your need to stand up call centers quickly, and a realization right away that you just couldn't do it in the conventional way as quickly as you needed to. So it gets back to that topic of business agility that we talked about before. And I think what Doug is seeing out there in the world right now, he's actually kind of on the cusp of where we see lots of businesses going, and some of the problems he's solving right now become the template for how other companies are going to solve their problems.
And that we've passed this tipping point now, and you talk about this third platform. Are we there? Do people still, give you some skepticism when you present some of your data and findings and say, "Oh, that's different, but our industry is not quite there"? What's the response to this message? And for both of you, because Doug, you're out also talking to a lot of other CIOs. Are they wanting to get where you are? Are they wanting to go here, or is there still some reluctance or resistance?
Well, first, if I could, Doug, from us, I think especially if we couch the notion of the third platform in the framework of platform and mainframe and client server, I think customers get it that the cloud represents a new platform, and that there are new sets of industry applications that are going to be available that weren't simply possible before, new sets of activities that you can now do, new flexibility that was not there before. So I think it is pretty firmly instantiated. I think especially when certain people see the kind of inverted cone there, or ice cream cone, whatever you want to call it, that is very telling for them, and they kind of get it. So Doug.
From my perspective, I still see somewhat of skepticism. I will tell you that the CIOs that I interface with, that they come from a .com or an applications background, they seem to be more open and aggressive towards cloud-based applications than CIOs that come from a network architecture and infrastructure background. I see them, their focus is still much more on data center consolidation and data center transition to more that private cloud. I'm still going to own and touch everything inside of my ecosystem.
Interesting. So it's more the background of the CIO. Is healthcare ahead of the curve as early adopters of some of these technologies? Is industry relevant on this?
I know healthcare is hospitals themselves, because of the patient health information and HIPAA, have been extremely concerned about data not being inside their data center. However, healthcare institutions today are really struggling with the fact that their facilities cannot accommodate additional growth inside of their data center. So they're having to look for, hey, where else can this data live inside of it, because we don't have the ability to put another server, or we don't have the network infrastructure to be able to accommodate this right now.
Interesting. We're going to give you the last word. We're at the edge of our time, but any last thoughts on trends or on industries? Anything, other feedback for CIOs out there?
Yeah, as you approach this sort of new world of sourcing and new capability and from the cloud, keep in mind Doug's words, especially around doing things at a measured pace. Don't do all your operations at once. Figure out what you can do, what you can get done that matches your risk tolerance and your requirement for business agility. You wouldn't buy conventional IT products quick without thoroughly vetting them, and you shouldn't do the same thing in the cloud. You should treat the cloud sort of in a very similar way when it comes to acquiring new capability, requiring that it meet the smell test around an SLA, and understanding what you're getting into. However, it will get you to new capability, new agility quickly, and that's important to many organizations.
Fantastic. Well, with that, I'd like to conclude today's webinar. Remind everyone they can visit Informatica Cloud for this and other information. And I want to thank you both, Robert and Doug, for spending your valuable time with us, sharing your insights. Thank you for attending.
Again for joining us today. This concludes today's web conference. You may now disconnect.